In the last video, we spoke all about the different paradigm shifts that we're seeing and how top agencies are thinking about sales. In this video, what I'll be doing is unpacking the sales prototype, which was best practice that we learned along the way. Now, I will say we haven't tested this. It's not proven, but there's a lot of interesting things that you could take away and you can drive into the way that you sell every single day. So let's break this down a little bit. In our last video, we talked all about the sales cycle. We talked about how there's the pre-trip, then we went into the trip itself, and then we talked about how there's this whole part on the other side on the post-trip, which is all about amplifying and priming your ability to get them back into the pre-trip experience and how that should create a virtuous cycle. Now, what we found was that there's 5 key phases that enable that and facilitate that and make that come to fruition. The first phase is all about discovery. So how are you learning a little bit more about the customer every single time? The next phase is all about education. Now that's got 2 parts to it. There's an internal education, so how are you learning more as you go through and you go into this process? But it's also how can you educate the customer? How can you help them know what their options are? How can you help them know what they don't know? And then bring everything that they may need to know to make the right decision. The third phase is all about guiding. So now that you have made it possible that they know what's available, how do you help them whittle that down and based on what's right for them, get to the right decision, get to that travel experience of a lifetime? The fourth phase is then you actually have to deliver on it. So these aren't separate. There's no difference between sales and execution. Sales is all about making that promise. You've done that in marketing and sales. How do you actually deliver and execute on that? If you can't do that, it doesn't matter what you're doing in the other spaces because they'll never trust you again. So you have to deliver and you have to meet those expectations or, as much as possible, exceed those expectations. And then the last part of this phase is all about amplify. Amplify is all within the post-trip. So how are you embedding this and how are you connecting with the customer, making sure that they had that best experience possible? And then how are you getting them thinking about the next travel experience while also learning where maybe you need to develop and grow your business? Let's take a look at each one of these phases a little bit more and break it down. Now, when you look at the discover phase, there's really 2 major parts to that. The first part is establishing a connection, which is establish the what. When people want to travel, it's likely because either they've seen something that you've put in front of them, or they've had a conversation with a friend, or they've talked with a friend who just recently came back from a trip and they want to have a similar experience. But establish the what. What do they think that they want? Now, the second part of the discovery phase is actually taking that a little bit further. It's understanding what their needs and objectives are, which is really around discovering why. So where in connection you're trying to figure out what it is that they're looking for or what they think they're looking for, this next phase, the needs and objectives phase, is all about discovering the why. Why do they think that? What are they really looking for? Just asking why and what and how over and over and over again until you establish what the root causes are. Because they may think that they want to go to Costa Rica, but based on the why, you may find actually they're talking more about things that we could give them within Honduras, just as an example to throw out there. Another way that I think about this discovery and I think about connection and the needs and objectives is I think about the what is all about getting the mind and the body, where the needs and objectives is all about getting the heart and the soul. It's about understanding more about them. Let's move into education. What are the 3 phases within education? First, having a co-creative experience that accelerates the connection with the customer. How can you sit there and how can you ask the right questions and have them co-generating the answers with you? That's going to be critical in order to quickly establish credibility and rapport. Next is all about the research and design. How do you grow the possibilities? When I gave you the overview of education, it was all about helping them know what they don't know. How do you do that for them? That's what happens in the research and design portion of the educate phase. And then next, it's all about the customer experience. How are you going to land that opportunity with them? And how are you going to facilitate that discussion and ask the right questions, which gets them to that decision as part of that next phase, the guide phase. Now, when we look at the guide phase, there's really two major parts. One is that decision. So how do you enable them to make the right choice for where they are in their life, the life stage that they're at, and what they're looking to do? Another big thing that we found that was often missing in this part was building anticipation and excitement. People are about to go on a trip of a lifetime. Don't miss that opportunity to really drive home a lot of learning and to get them continually thinking about all of the different activities that they'll be doing and the experiences that they're going to be having. Seed that, build that, create that anticipation. Then, as I mentioned, we move into the deliver phase. There's really one part of that, and that's the trip itself. Provide the promised experience. And then last, when we look at amplify, there's two major parts to that. One is value amplification. So how are you going to align the trip experience that they've had with their identity? Making sure that you bring in the fact that you're at a life stage that you are looking to have X, you've been provided with that. Make sure that you draw that connection and make sure you're constantly highlighting the good things. And that if by chance there was an issue along the way, talk about how maybe you mitigated things that they didn't even see that was going on. How are you proactive in that respect? Then there's also priming. How do you get them back in the pipeline? That's what the second part of the amplify phase is all about. Let's take this, again, another step deeper. When we look at discover and we break apart the connection and the needs and objectives phases, we've talked about that it's establishing the what and discovering the why. Well, when you talk about establishing the what, it's really got two pieces. There's a customer orientation and then there's an agency orientation. On the customer side of connection, get their contact information, extract what their perceived state is, and get some early qualification. Now, I want to make sure that I say they're innocent until proven guilty, so don't write them off as just someone who's a tire kicker right from the beginning. Give them the benefit of the doubt, but do some early qualification for yourself. And on the agency side, during the connection, make sure that you're establishing rapport with them. Make sure that you're elevating the positioning in the mind of the buyer. You're more than an agent, you're an advisor. Now, when we look at the needs and objectives portion and the discover why, the customer side of it is identify really who all the stakeholders are. I can't tell you how many times I heard stories of people putting a whole trip together just to realize that the actual core decision maker of the trip happening or not was not in the room, and maybe they had different wants and needs and they've rejected itineraries because of that. Also, you want to be determining their personality and what their goals are. Again, you're getting to their heart and their soul in this case. Extract those motivators, extract those interests, and understand what those decision drivers are. In this, also get ideas on what their previous travel experiences have been. Where have they gone? What did they like? What did they not like? And also get those special needs identified. And then in this phase, you also want to make sure that as an agency that you're communicating your expectations, that the customer understands what is the process that we're about to go through, what are the fees, or what is this going to cost in order to put this sort of itinerary together? What needs do you have as an agency in order to get this done? What do I need to do? What is my responsibility in this? That's all around discover. Now, when we get into the educate phase, the first part is co-creation. What are you trying to do here? Accelerate the connection. And if you take that a step further, you need to generate high-level options from this discover phase. So they were thinking that they wanted to do Costa Rica. Well, talk to them very roughly around what it would look like if they went to Honduras, or what it would look like if they went to Colombia or another location that might have similar opportunities. Gauge their interest based on their reactions. If they've had very bad experiences with Colombia based on what they've seen or heard in the news, maybe that's not worth your time and effort, but you get that by understanding their body language. You get that by understanding how they come back when you communicate those things. That's all learning as part of the process. Get the client actively involved in this and having fun with it. Maybe they've never even known what was possible in Honduras, so start to paint that picture for them. If you've been there personally, tell a story and then bring it back and bring it to life for them. And getting them acting as your promoter And if necessary, that's where you're going to start to obtain that planning fee. Now, again, it's all about being open and transparent in this. Don't hide those fees. But make sure that even if the customer were not to continue on the journey with you and to go through the rest of this cycle with you, that they're going to walk away having had a different experience, and an experience that was better than anything that they've ever seen. Have them talking about that. Give them reason to evangelize for you, even if they're not your customer. Now we go into the research and design portion. You grow the possibilities. What are all of the different choices, and what are all of the different options that they have that will resonate with them based on what you've heard about the mind and the body and the heart and the soul? Provide different scales and variations to tweak the experience. It's never going to be completely right the first time, but know where your leeway is. If you think that they're going to want to stay in 3-star hotels based on the experience you have, know what it's going to cost and what the options are of going up or going down a bit to save money, whatever that may be. Again, you're all about providing value to them. You need to be able to then also take them on a trip from high-level options all the way down to here's the value and experience solutions that you're getting from this trip. It's a different way that you communicate it. Don't just talk about all of the features and the benefits and the perks and the price that you're going to get. Don't just tell them, yes, when you arrive at the hotel, you're going to get a bottle of wine. Tell them about the experience that they could have while they're there, and then if necessary, bring that bottle of wine, if that's the case, into that scenario. But don't make it all about the bottle. Make it about the experience and the value. And come away from that time being more knowledgeable. Last is all about landing that customer experience and facilitating that discussion. Help the customer see and understand the options. Get them to agree on a solution based on that conversation, and get that final itinerary and that commitment from them. We talked earlier about REI and compared that to Craigslist. REI was all about asking the right questions and then guiding them into a solution, all the meanwhile learning about the customer, but then also helping the customer learn about themselves as well in the process. But they came away from that with something that was right for them. The bike that was right for them in that example. When you go into the guide phase, first is all around enabling the right choice through their decision. So you've helped the customer navigate the complex world of travel. The customer gets the best experience at the best value, and they feel that. They don't feel like you're trying to take advantage of them. They don't have questions about where is the money coming from. Is it coming from the suppliers or is it coming from me? They feel like they've been connected with you and engaged with you. Now you're going to gain that business. If you do that successfully, you've got a new customer, or it's potentially a repeat customer. So you've proven yourself again in the mind of the buyer. When we talk about this anticipation and excitement portion that I had mentioned earlier is often not done as well as it could be, it's all about getting that client excited for the trip. Now, I cannot tell you how many times I also saw people come in and say, yeah, we get them excited. We give them a booklet that gives them every piece of information that they could possibly want about their trip. That's overload for people. Give it to them in small snippets. Think about how Twitter works or how Facebook works or how all of these other connection mechanisms are now starting to work. It's all about the headline. So if they're going to be spending time at a hotel in a certain city for a few days, give them just information on that city. Maybe you say, here's day one's information. And then several days later, a week later, a month later, depending on the time till their trip, give them a little bit more. Get them continually thinking about it. Be top of mind and add a little bit more value to that. Maintain contact past just the deposit. Make it tangible for them. They're spending thousands and thousands of dollars with you. Make sure that they can feel that. Don't leave it to chance. When we go into deliver, it's all about exceeding their expectations and proactively mitigating risk and rapidly dealing with issues. Handle things before it happens. One story that came up as I was out on an observation speaking with an agent was all around a group that was looking to travel to New York City for the marathon a few years back. Now, this was a large group. They spent all of this time and effort with them to communicate to them what their options were, to work through all of the different choices, and to help facilitate a decision. And guess what the leader of that group did? As soon as he had all that information, he went and he booked everything for his group online. So naturally, that agent felt a bit alienated and betrayed in that. But guess what happened? I don't know if you remember, but the New York City Marathon didn't exactly go off as they had expected. There was a large storm that went through, and it flooded the entire city. Now, what this agency had done is that for all of their other groups and all of their other travelers in New York City at the time, they had seen the storm coming. It wasn't something that was a surprise by any means. And they had proactively reached out to different transportation groups to make sure that based on different options, whether someone would want to stay in the city based on if they wanted to go somewhere else or if they just wanted to go home, that they were able to get out of the city and get to those places. Or if they were staying, that they had hotels arranged for additional nights. They did that well in advance, so as the issue came up, they were ready for that. And they had everything laid out for the customer. That was value. Do I have to tell you what happened to the guy who did not go through that process? Guess who he called? Shortly after that, he was calling the agency, and they were actually kind enough, and they helped him, and they did the best that they possibly could. And you know what that agent told me? That person, I guarantee, is now a customer for life. So think about this. How are you doing that for your customers? How are you mitigating that? And how are you exceeding their expectations? The last phase that we're going to dive into here is the value amplification and priming pieces of Amplify. First, you want to align with their identity. Have the customer telling everyone that this was the best experience of their life. That's what you're likely thinking of when you say, what am I in the business of? I want to provide these experiences for people. So how are you doing that, and how are you making sure that they have that and that they communicate that? You need, during this part, to solidify your value add in their mind. It doesn't mean boasting. It just means making sure that they know where you brought value. You also were likely going to do a quality review at this time. And again, don't make it all about bad. Don't make it all about improving. That's important. You want to do that. But make it about what were the great things that you experienced that you thought you were going to get and that we actually delivered on and that you experienced. Now, in the priming portion of this, you want to accelerate that next job. You want to accelerate repeat business. Extract the insight from them on what are the different types of activities that they would like to do. What are new destinations that they'd like to go to? What experiences or what broader understanding and reflection are they looking for? That's all important to continue on this trip and continue on this lifetime customer value. Also, see this as your chance to land that lifelong evangelist who can generate more leads through referrals. We talked about that a lot within the marketing videos. How are you getting word of mouth, and how are you turning your customers into your marketing and sales teams? Now that we've covered the sales prototype, I would say in some pretty good depth, I do want to point out that in the appendix of your workbook, you actually have several more pages that go much deeper within all of these different areas. It gives you ideas. It talks about when we saw things going wrong. It will give you principles with which to live by in each one of those sections. So I encourage you to go and to check that out. Now, think about this, and I would say talk amongst your team. Which part of the sales prototype do you already implement? What could you do to change or to improve or to implement some of these practices tomorrow if it was an option for you? What is it that you really want to extract out of this? Take that time. I hope that you found this sales prototype interesting. I'll talk to you soon.